Tulsi Gabbard is a former Democratic congressman from the state of Hawaii who used to be a little bit controversial in the Democratic Party, not only because of certain statements that she would, she was pretty aggressive when it comes to, engaging with Harris and how the Democratic primary campaign went in 2020. I don't really care all about that. The reason I have always been a little suspicious of Tulsi Gabbard has to do with her history of being involved in a homophobic religious sects. And if you want to know more, you can look into it yourself. But that, of course, puts me off. She has since then disavowed that, say, hey, I don't hate the queers now, okay? Okay, you homos aren't totally disgusting, so, that's good. But the thing that always really threw me off about her was her trips to Bashar al-Assad, Syria. The same Bashar al-Assad who butchered hundreds of thousands of his own people, who had torture camps that would take the press, civil dissidents, and any opposition to Bashar al-Assad, or just anybody that one of his government thugs decided to take off the street, and threw them through torture facilities. A literal, like a torture factory, which each layer worse than the last. And that's not even to talk about the kids that were murdered, or the use of barrel bombs or chemical weapons against his own people, or just the fact that Assad also seemed to attract the worst social media influencers. So even if I wanted to hide myself from his brutality and hide myself from his 13 years of butchering his own people, stacked upon his father, Hafez al-Assad's butchering of his own people in Hama, well, it's kind of hard. It was kind of hard to shield myself from that. And so when Tulsi Gabbard went out there and not only had these meetings with Assad to try to engage in some rogue diplomacy, but then condemned the United States for condemning Russia's bombing campaign in Syria. The same bombing campaign that bombed 3 hospitals within 24 hours. 3 active hospitals that were treating civilians, where the UN was giving Russia data on where different medical facilities were in Syria, and then those hospitals were bombed. So they could not have claimed ignorance when they were bombing those hospitals, as documented by local Syrian journalists and credible international news organizations. So I think her saying condemning that is bad, and we shouldn't condemn that because they're bombing terrorists. I'm sorry, okay? The hospital and the doctors are not Al-Qaeda. I'm sorry to say that you can say this or that about whatever rebel group, but these hospitals are there to treat human beings that were under siege for a decade, a literal decade. And she doesn't think that deserves to be condemned. That's not even to talk about the fact that Tulsi Gabbard went out there and pushed Russian propaganda at the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. People talk about, and people from her sect talk about all the time, WMDs, the war in Iraq. We invaded. We said they had nukes. They didn't end up having nukes. Dick Cheney famously said, we don't want the smoking, the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. Turns out they had a small arsenal of chemical weapons, but not the atomic weapon that they talked about. The WMD lies created a generation of people who are very hesitant about American interventionism overseas. Not that hesitancy isn't well earned, but then she goes out being propped up by that movement of critics of American power, of these people who are supposed to be sensible about the fact that a government can lie to you, a government can manufacture consent for these types of offensive wars and committing the crime of aggression. And then she goes out and repeats the Russian lie that the Ukrainians have these bioweapons laboratories. And oh my God, what are the Ukrainians researching there? Are they researching weapons that will target Russian DNA? Like this is a Disney Channel original series, okay? And next up is Hannah Montana before That's So Raven. No, okay? It was nonsense. But at the opening stages of the war, instead of covering the war crimes like the massacre at Bucha, instead of covering the mass graves that had bodies that were more than 400 mass graves that saw the largest mass grave since the Yugoslav genocide in Europe. And instead of talking about that, she decided to focus on Russian propaganda. So I just want to put all that forward because the Russians literally called her their gal. Their quote, Russian state TV said, Tulsi Gabbard's our gal, and then make thirst trap videos of her to try to sell her as great and fantastic to the Russian public. Russia today loves her because she is doing their work for them and publishing Russian propaganda. So I go into detail about all of this to just put forward the fact why I'm going to enjoy every moment, every millisecond, every molecule of Donald Trump taking her and throwing her under the bus and her bumping around those political tires. It's going to be beautiful. So let's start here. Tulsi Gabbard has a long record before she did her party switch and somehow went from a quote-unquote Bernie Sanders style Democrat. Bernie Sanders was never an Assadist, okay? Or it never did apologia for the Assad regime or bombing hospitals, okay? So I throw into question the idea that she was a Bernie Sanders style Democrat. I never heard Bernie, the top 1% of hospitals must be bombed. That didn't happen, okay? But that was the idea. I don't imagine her going from that to a Trumper in 3 years completely organically. I think there's a certain amount of self-interest that is motivating that. But back in the day, if you were to listen to Tulsi Gabbard, she would worry and warn about interventionism, about American power run amok, where she wants to bomb countries in Syria. She wanted us to go into Syria and bomb, right? She's fine with that. But when it came to, and helping the Assad regime, but she didn't want to bomb Iran. Fair enough. I don't want to bomb Iran really either. I'm not a big fan of bombing in most cases. And she is against that. And you can go back in 2019 and see from this post that she made when she was going for the Democratic primary nomination, President Trump seems determined to go to war with Iran, even after he campaigned on a platform of ending regime change wars. And so her coming on board with Donald Trump, of course, was a big shift, but that doesn't mean she can abandon literally every value or thing she's ever said. And so when she goes before the Senate committee and she's getting confirmed to be the top intelligence figure in the entire country, to be the top intelligence figure in the entire nation, mind you, she's never had a role in intelligence before. She's never managed intelligence. She's never managed intelligence assets. She's never managed like CIA agents or anything like that. She is going from National Guardsman to top intelligence official based on her loyalty to Donald Trump and the fact that she'll purge those who are not loyal to him in the intelligence community. That's my assessment. You can disagree with it if you want. I can't wait to hear about all of the intelligence achievements of Tulsi Gabbard. But she goes before the committee and she says, hey, I do not believe Iran is close to getting an atomic weapon. I have looked at the intelligence assessment, the same intelligence assessment that 4 other intelligence sources have reported to CNN, says that Iran is about 3 years roughly from attaining an atomic weapon, an atomic device, and then getting the delivery system that could launch it a far enough distance so they can deliver the atomic bomb. Because right now, if they were to use the fissile material that, the 60% enrichment, if they were moving up to 90% and they were use what they have, they could get about 10 atomic devices. But that takes time. It takes time to go from 60% enrichment to 90% enrichment, which is where you need to get at. It takes time to make the ICBMs necessary to deliver that atomic device to your target, right? And so she said that they're not close to getting that. And then that statement was brought to Trump, and many of you already know this, and Trump said, I don't care what Tulsi said. His top intelligence official, that's his gal. I don't care what she said. They're close to getting an atomic weapon. Here's the clip.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003.
How close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having it.
Top intelligence official in the country. I don't care what she said. That's the sign of a ripple in the relationship. Some might even describe it as a tear. Now, look, I want this relationship to fail. I want to see Tulsi Gabbard fail. She is one of the people that I will 100% just openly declare I am a hater. I am a hater to the bone. I am the type of hater that if she slips and falls and bumps her head, I'm going to be in the stands laughing, eating popcorn. I'm going to be passing the J around. I'm going to be having a great time. Okay? So I'm coming to this from a position of complete bias. But when I heard those words, I felt a rush of joy pass through my body because I suspected that it doesn't really stop there, does it? And for Trump to just kind of throw that out there, is it just him being off the cuff, or is this signs of an ever developing, worsening relationship between Tulsi and Donald Trump? And we really didn't know. But apparently, it's a sign of an ever worsening relationship between Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard, despite the purges, despite the stalwart loyalty. Tulsi Gabbard is still starting to see the ripples form. And want to know where a lot of this came from.
Does Donald Trump have a concept of a nuclear triad? Anyway, wanted to send you some love from Oklahoma.
Hey, from Oklahoma of all places. Hey, I hope you enjoy your state-mandated Trump Bible coming to a school near you, according to the state superintendent. I just, oh my, I can't believe those are real words I'm saying that is tied to a real story. But thank you for the $10. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I think Trump probably knows what a nuclear triad is, right? It's only 3, and I think he can count that high. I think he knows he can figure out what a submarine is. I think he can figure out what a ICBM launcher is from a traditional launch site in Montana, a missile silo. And I think he knows what a big bomber plane is. I'm sure he can go wow. I'm sure he can figure that out. He might have thought those stealth bombers were actually invisible, like they were Wonder Woman's plane. But I think he probably knows what a nuclear triad is. God willing. Apparently, according to Politico, Tulsi Gabbard and Trump have been splitting. They have been splitting to some capacity, and Trump was actually quite miffed about a bizarre video that Tulsi Gabbard released that was not approved by Trump, and many in Trump's circle question, why exactly she released this video. See, one of my problems with Tulsi is that I've always felt that she's been a little bit of a warmonger when it comes to certain peoples, for example, the Syrians, and has also been a little bit of a fearmonger. So she's kind of like a lopsided warmonger when it comes to the Syrians, but not, say, the Russians. All the smoke for the people that are being, put under siege, none of the smoke for the people engaging in imperialist expansion, which, I always found quite distasteful. But I also found her to be a fearmonger. And this video that she released after she visited Hiroshima, I think kind of pushes to that point. And this apparently kind of upset Trump. They thought that this video was the wrong message to send, considering the escalation in tensions with the Iranians and the question of American intervention in the Middle East. In fact, let's read first, the tension, and then I'll show you the video so you can get an idea. At 5:30 a.m. on June 10th, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard tweeted a cryptic 3-minute video warning that the political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tension between nuclear powers, and that the world is on the brink of nuclear annihilation. Trump saw the unauthorized video and became incensed, complaining to associates at the White House that she had spoken out of turn. According to 3 people familiar with the episode, 2 of them inside the administration, and all granted anonymity to describe the sensitive dynamics. This came only a few days after Israel hawks met with the Trump White House to lobby in support of Israel's attacks against Iran, even though many people, myself included, originally were interpreting this more as kind of like, hey, let's continue to console the Russians as they use atomic weapons for threatening international suicide bombing, which is what you're threatening when you're threatening to blow up the world if your war doesn't go your way, in favor of their offensive war in Ukraine. But no, apparently this, maybe it had to do a little bit with that. Maybe it just had to do with the topic generally. Either way, though, the Trump administration did not read it well. Let me play some of that video to give you guys the idea of the tone that she was dishing out here. Mind you, this was not a visit to Hiroshima. She went out of her way after visiting our assets in the region in Japan to just stop by Hiroshima and record this video, not at the request of the Trump administration. This was her initiative.
I recently visited Hiroshima in Japan and stood at the epicenter of a city that remains scarred by the unimaginable horror caused by a single nuclear bomb dropped in 1945, 80 years ago. It's hard for me to find the words to express what I saw, the stories that I heard, the haunting sadness that still remains. This is an experience that will stay with me forever. This attack obliterated the city, killed over 300,000 people, many dying instantly while others died from severe burns, injuries, radiation sickness, and cancer that set in the following months and years.
I gotta be honest, look, Hiroshima, horrible tragedy, horrible what happened. Isn't it weird that Tulsi Gabbard can express so much emotions and grief when it comes to this tragedy from 80, 90 years ago, but can't express that when it comes to tragedies happening right now? When it comes to, for example, the bombing of Kiev on a near daily basis, killing civilians, people being buried in their homes. Like, it's not that I don't want to see any grief expressed here. It's just that you're the head of the intelligence community right now, right? Not in 1945. You can impact the world right now. And so I would like to see a lot more smoke for the issues of right now.
Nagasaki suffered the same fate. Homes, schools, families, all gone in a flash. The survivors, the hibakusha, they carried the pain of extreme burns, radiation sickness, and loss for decades. Survivors of this attack were asked to put in paintings and drawings their own memories and how they felt and what they saw, and those paintings and the suffering that they conveyed, the pain and the sense of loss were almost more powerful than the photos themselves. Yet this one bomb that caused so much destruction in Hiroshima was tiny compared to today's nuclear bombs. The bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima had a yield of just 15 kilotons of TNT, whereas today's nuclear warheads range in size from 100 kilotons to over 1 megaton. A single nuclear weapon today could kill millions in just minutes. Just one of these nuclear bombs would vaporize everything at its core: people, buildings, life itself. The shockwave would crush structures miles away, killing and maiming countless people. And then comes the fallout. Radioactive poison spreading through the air, water, and soil, condemning survivors to agonizing deaths or lifelong suffering. A nuclear winter could follow, with smoke and ash completely blocking the sun, plunging the world into darkness and cold, killing crops and starving billions. Acid rain would scar the earth, wiping out entire ecosystems. This isn't some made-up science fiction story. This is the reality of what's at stake, what we are facing now. Because as we stand here today, closer to the brink of nuclear annihilation than ever before.
And that, look, there's where my bullshit meter goes beep. Look, it's not that, what's this documentary called? Yeah, it's just like, dude, like, what is that? Like, you're the head intelligence official. That's her job, is to be head intelligence official. Her job is to take intelligence and prepare the president's daily brief and to tell him like, hey, the terrorists might attack this, you know, Iran is interested in that. That's her job. You know, it's a very simple job when it comes to at least the bounds of what her responsibility is. It isn't simple in what she has to do in her day to day in collecting from so many different intelligence sources. It's part of the reason that I wish the president of the United States chose somebody who, you know, knew what they were doing. You know, she knows how to purge people who aren't loyal to President Trump. But, you know,
And that's
besides
why
that,
we must let Russia take over Ukraine.
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that scares me here. And Heckers, thank you for the primer. And always Reason, thank you for the 100 Danish fun bucks. I appreciate that.
Burns is an immoral.
I am
morally
not
corrupt,
against
bankrupt man.
informing the American public of the destructive potential of atomic weapons so that we don't treat these things frivolously. That we don't talk about like glass in the Middle East and turning it into one big crater like people talked about after 2001. You should go watch the Howard Stern show after 9/11, like in the immediate aftermath of the type of rhetoric that was immediately following the 9/11 terror attacks. And I'm not against informing the American public, but when you come out there and say we're closer to nuclear annihilation than ever before, this is just a lie. This is just a lie. This is somebody who's living in the moment, who specifically lives in the podcast world and wants to grab headlines, grab people's attention, and therefore is fear-mongering. We were much closer to nuclear annihilation during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We had our bombers loaded, on standby, ready to go. We were ready to start World War III. We were ready to drop atomic bombs. I mean, you're going to tell me when Curtis LeMay, okay, Mr. Firebomb, Mr. Raise Tokyo to the ground, Mr. The only mistake I ever made was not getting us to nuke the Soviets, somebody who wanted atomic war, somebody who wanted this hellfire, right? That guy was in JFK's ear. He was one of the guys during the period when we were on the brink, telling him, nuke him, nuke him, nuke him, nuke him, nuke him. Like that was his position. When he was in those meetings, everybody else was like, let's do diplomacy. And, well, sir, we need to make sure they know that we have the power to. And he was in the back room, like with two pom-poms, like, what do we say? Moscow on fire. What do we say? Nuke them now. You know, that was his position. And you're going to tell me that when that moment, we're closer than in that moment to nuclear annihilation than ever before. We stand at, this is not only ahistorical, this is also disrespectful to the legacy of the atomic standard that has been built up in the last 80 years of the, you know, human beings learning how to split the atom and, you know, use these types of devastating devices. Each year that passes, the nuclear non-proliferation standard, the standard of non-use of these weapons in traditional warfare, continues to grow. There are consequences for you being the first nation to use these bombs. If you're the one to break the standard, every country that wants that standard to stay because they don't want to see that atomic weapon used against you, they're not going to be happy with you. You think if the Russians used a nuke on Kiev tomorrow, the Chinese would respond with, thanks, buddy, that's a good idea? Or do you think that they would be scared that this might encourage some behavior from the North Koreans and get them tangled in some stuff? Or do you think the Indians, who are getting Russian energy export at a discount, do you think they're going to be very happy to see that when they've got the Pakistanis on their border, which they're constantly feuding with, that have their atomic arsenal? Do you think the Pakistanis will be happy? Do you think they'll be happy about the stakes being raised anytime they have a confrontation with the Indians? Will the United States be happy? Will any European country be happy? Will any country on the planet be happy except tin bot dictatorships that want to use atomic bombs for revanchist claims? There was a standard that has been built up, and every year that passes, the standard strengthens in some way. And in those early years, people in like those first 20 years of us having atomic weapons, it cannot be emphasized enough how much we were kind of winging it. That we were like losing nukes I know that's crazy to say. We misplaced nukes. Like, oops, drop one in the ocean. Whoopsie daisy. Oops, we dropped this nuke off a plane by accident, landed in a French bush. Oopsie daisy. Whoa, looks like the radar says we're about to get nuked. Get ready, everyone. Wait a second. Let's wait one more minute just to, oh, it looks like it was just an error. Whoops. And that wasn't just on our side. That was on the Soviet side too. And this was all before these norms had properly built up. This was all before these nukes had become so devastating that they can do the damage that they can do today. And so, you know, the stakes have been risen to the point that the stakes being this high is a deterrent in and of itself. And so when she says this, as the top intelligence official in the country, she's supposed to have, I mean, you know, I know this is, you know, I'm kind of just taking over the name here, but I would imagine some intelligence. Look, if you're going to talk about atomic war, talk about it realistically. Talk about it as, yes, it's devastating. Yes, it's destructive. Talk about what it meant for the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Talk about what it meant for the people who, you know, live near testing grounds. Or talk about what it could mean for people if, you know, these bombs were dropped. But when you're playing footage of the you know, the Golden Gate Bridge collapsing from an atomic blast and then saying we are closer to a nuclear annihilation than ever before, everybody panic. If that's what you're doing, you're just fear-mongering. No wonder Donald Trump looked at this when he's having a confrontation with the Iranians, and of course there's the ever continuing you know, dragging of the feet when it comes to the diplomatic way with the Russians. I don't know what you want to call it. You know, they got their own head up there, whatever. But yeah, of course he looked at this and was like, what is this? This was not approved by Trump. This was not approved by anybody at the White House. This was not approved by anybody in Trump's cabinet. This was just something that she went off on her little passion project and decided to use her platform as the top intelligence official in the country. Somebody that if they come out and say, hello, I am the top intelligence official in the country, that drags people's attention. Oh, she's a top intelligence official. She must know something. And then the first thing you hear is, we're all gonna die. Like, that's not good. That's fear-mongering. That's fear-mongering that just makes people panic, and you're crying wolf. And then when we actually got a real, like, oh, snap, we have a moment here where there's a confrontation. You know, there's oh my goodness, the Chinese have decided to explode an atomic device near Taiwan as a show of force, and the United States is thinking about the responses it has in kind. You know, that right there, maybe we could say something that's close to this. But to say this because Israel and Iran are firing missiles at each other, because we're going on 4 years in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it is the way it works. Like, day one of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, oh my gosh, closer than annihilation than ever. Oh, it's day two. Well, it's day two, so obviously we're even closer, and so now we're on day 3. So it's, hey, we're even closer. You know what this feels like? It feels like, oh, you know, we're every day we're closer to nuclear annihilation, because that, you know, we're always getting closer to whenever a nuke will be used every day that passes. It's just hacky. It's just very hacky.
Political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers.
Carelessly fermenting fear. Oh my God, we wouldn't want that. We wouldn't want fearmonger. We wouldn't want that, guys.
Perhaps it's because they are confident that they will have access to nuclear shelters for themselves and for their families that regular people won't have access to. So it's up to
God, this music. My goodness. They're kind of a little on the nose, isn't it? A little bit on the nose.
To us, the people, to speak up and demand an end to this madness. We must reject this path to nuclear war and work toward a world where no one has to live in fear of a nuclear holocaust.
Wow. So now that she posted anxiety in a box, Donald Trump wasn't very happy. Okay. Let me read you the quote on this. I don't think he dislikes Tulsi as a person, but certainly the video made him not super hot on her. And he doesn't like it when people are off message, said one of the people, a senior administration official. The official added that Trump also doesn't appreciate it when people appear to be correcting him, and that many took that video as trying to correct the administration's position. Trump's reaction to the video, which has not been previously reported, underscores a widening gap between a president on the brink of potentially joining Israel's war and his anti-interventionist intelligence chief, who in the past has been adamantly against the U.S. engaging in new foreign conflicts. Indeed, the man Gabbard endorsed on the campaign trail, who spoke of ending Ukraine-Russia war on day one and ushering a new era of peace, is striking a different tone from her now that he's sitting behind the resolute desk. That is true. That is true. And you want to know, it doesn't end there. And this is when I really started to think, oh, snap. Because you want to know what I remember from when Mike Waltz fell? Mike Waltz, the former national security advisor to Donald Trump, before they decided that Marco Rubio was such a genius that he could be both Secretary of State and national security advisor at the same time. Little Marco, he's the little Marco that could, even though Henry Kissinger is the last person to attempt that. And Henry Kissinger said in the 60s that it was a terrible idea. And that was way before the national security advisor position had so much intelligence inflow in comparison to today. So the role has expanded, and we're placing that on Marco Rubio, who also is in charge of other roles as well for the Trump administration. Look, I'm just saying Marco Rubio ain't superhuman. Point is, though, when Mike Waltz ended up getting the boot, the signal that really, I think, said that was the nail in the coffin, we know it's over, was when Mike Waltz was left on the tarmac. That this guy who went on Fox to defend Trump during his darkest days, when the popularity against him was swelling the most on Fox News as a congressman, was left on the tarmac. And he didn't go on the plane. He went off on his own way as everybody else went on the plane and flew away. That, I think, was the ultimate signal. Well, listen to this. Fox News's Peter Doocy reports that Tulsi Gabbard was left out of a meeting to discuss Israel and Iran at Camp David on Sunday, June 8th. We can report via a U.S. official that DNI Tulsi Gabbard was not invited to last week's Camp David retreat, where President Trump convened senior national security officials to discuss the Middle East. She had a scheduling conflict with National Guard orders, but was never invited in the first place. So the way the administration might defend is say, hey, she had a scheduling conflict. But to be clear, before they knew that she had a scheduling conflict, she was not invited. Things are not looking hot in Tulsi land. And in the spirit of aloha, as she used to put it, she might need to learn the spirit of get the fuck out of here, not aloha, okay? Look, I'm not saying that she is going to get the boot. Donald Trump did expend a lot of political capital to get her into that position, but he also, made it so the Republicans had to spend a lot of money to replace Mike Waltz in an election where his replacement performed worse than him, and they had to fight this semi-competitive election, spend all this money from the Republican Party's coffers in order to replace Mike Waltz. And so now they're going to eject another person in the cabinet like Tulsi Gabbard, who they spent all this money and resources trying to get in there. At least they wouldn't, they didn't sacrifice a congressional seat, since the only time she ever had a congressional seat was as a Democrat in Hawaii. So I would say that this isn't the death nail in the coffin, but it does show, again, problems in the land of aloha, a certain split on messaging, on communication, and this is the thing that I want you all to look out for. Experience. So far, the intelligence scandals have been felt mostly with Mike Waltz, who is no longer with us, as we all saw from the Signal chat, the journalist being added into the room and getting all this top secret and, classified information that they refused to acknowledge was classified information about when they were going to strike the Houthis. And then Pete Hegseth went and he told his wife about it, and Trump ejected Mike Waltz but kept Pete Hegseth. How long is it until Tulsi Gabbard has a scandal like that? I mean, I really do think it's only a matter of time. And if Tulsi Gabbard can't stay on messaging, which is something that Trump cares quite a lot about, he's a media guy. If she can't stay on message and she's not communicating with the team, and she starts having scandals where, even if they spent a lot of political capital to get her in there, it's not like they got to run a new congressional election to replace her. I can understand if the Trump administration doesn't want to go through the process of having to get a new DNI head and keeping her on for that reason. I can also understand that she was willing to fire those put forward by Laura Loomer and others that were disloyal to President Trump. And so I think that type of loyalty is useful for Trump. And with her being somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience, when she slips up, every time she does, she'll be reminded that the only reason she holds this position is because Donald Trump chose her. Donald Trump liked the idea of a Democrat that flipped a Republican. Donald Trump, when he tends to pick women, but she got picked not based off her experience, but due to the fact that she was able to snuggle up to the man and prove loyalty. And so I'm not saying that Tulsi Gabbard is going to get the boot, as much as I would like to make that announcement here. Oh my gosh, if I could be the one to break that Tulsi Gabbard is about to get kicked out. But what I am saying is that if she can't stay on message and she's not in these rooms communicating about these key moments, all it'll take, I think, to really make Trump consider it is a few scandals. And with that lack of experience, I don't think that's hard to see. Also, I want to throw out there that Tulsi Gabbard did cancel a Senate intelligence briefing that was supposed to happen today as tensions with Iran continue to escalate. Maybe she's going to be in this meeting instead, and so she had to cancel. Or maybe she's not going to be, and she's just canceling because she doesn't want to get grilled by Congress about, hey, Tulsi Gabbard, hey, anti-interventionist, do you believe that Congress holds the power to declare war? Do you believe the War Powers Act discerns that Congress is the one that has the power to declare war? Don't you think Congress should have a say if we're going to bomb Iran? I don't think she'd like to be put in that hot seat. So whether it was for personal dignity reasons, due to the fact she can't deal with the heat, or, she doesn't want to be questioned about these recent reports, I don't know. Maybe she really needed to be in an intelligence briefing this time. Maybe they decided, okay, Tulsi, your time out from Camp David is over. Come back into the fold. I don't know. But what I do know is that Tulsi Gabbard and Trump's divide seems real, and every moment of it I am going to enjoy, because it's the only good point of Tulsi Gabbard being up there is she has the high likelihood of getting burnt in this game of Minesweeper that is navigating in Trump's cabinet. Checking the live cams around Tehran.